It's Hugh Hewitt. Pleased to welcome on this day Admiral James Stavridis, retired United States Navy, former Allied Supreme Commander of NATO. And, of course, the person I've been watching as much as I can. He's made appearances. Now I get to ask questions of him. Admiral, good morning to you. Thank you for joining me.
Always good to be with you, Hugh.
You must have had a very interesting perspective as events unfolded. Let's work backwards. Where do you think we are this morning? Then let's move backwards through the timeline for your reactions at each stage of the events.
I think at the moment we're right where we were about a week ago, except that Soleimani, a very dangerous chess piece for the Iranians, is off the board.
Do you think that deterrence has been restored where perhaps it had eroded?
I think that's a fair statement, and my evidence for that would be the lightness of the strike that the Iranians conducted. Now, let's face it, there are other shoes that could drop, obviously, Hugh. I'd say three indicators to watch are the Arabian Gulf itself, what happens on the water out there. Do the Iranians get more aggressive at sea, as they have a number of times over the last several years? Number two, watch cyber. I think there's still at least a 50-50 chance of a significant cyber event. And number three, most obviously, watch the proxies, these Shia militias that are scattered all over the region. Would Iran encourage one of them to take another shot at an American embassy or a senior American official? I think it's unlikely. I think we've probably got a pause, and I think you could fairly say that taking out Soleimani created a higher level of deterrence in the eyes of the Iranians than existed before that shot.
Now, Admiral, I do believe that perhaps risk to our allies has increased because it appears that President Trump's red line is a dead American or a wounded American, not a Saudi, not an oil facility, not a transnational tanker that isn't flying an American flag. He's really drawing his red line around American assets and American people, and especially American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. It's a different red line that has existed in the past, but I think that's how I read it. Do you read it the same way?
I do, with one addition. Certainly, I agree there's an increased level of risk for our allies who tend to get caught in the crossfire, Iraq being the most obvious example of this, but certainly Israel under, I think, greater risk, unquestionably. The other is interesting, too, and we need to think about this horizontally. We've thought about it kind of vertically, but because so much intelligence and attention has been focused on Iran, and I think will continue to be, as you know, there's limited numbers of big intelligence assets, everything from Global Hawks to our most advanced spy planes to our day-to-day intelligence collection to our satellite systems. That is not being focused in places like Venezuela. It's not being focused in East Africa, by the way, where we just had 3 Americans killed several days ago. It's hard to precisely say, well, you put all your intel on Iran, and certainly we have lots of intel all around the world all the time. But that focus on Iran, I think, opens some vulnerabilities for U.S. interests outside of Iran. So hopefully, as tensions ease at least somewhat here, and we go off a hair-trigger potential alert situation, we'll be able to look harder at what's going on in Venezuela, which I think is a big story.
Now, Admiral Stavridis, I agree with you. We got to go back to that because Maduro is attempting to crush the last remnants of legitimate government there. But let me for a moment focus on the New York Times first paragraph this morning. The alert came to the White House shortly after 2 p.m. on Tuesday, which would have been 11 p.m. out here in 11 a.m. in California. A flash message from American spy agencies, the officials sometimes call a squawk. In the coming hours, it warned an Iranian attack on American troops was almost certain. Our national security team scrambled, our military scrambled, our troops, about 5,000 of them in Iraq, went into secure positions as secure as possible, and no one was killed. I personally believe when I put that piece of information together with the killing of Soleimani and other indications that we have within the mullah someone who is talking to us or someone inside the IRGC who is not unhappy to see Soleimani dispatched, or forces within the regime who do not want to test President Trump. And that's my suspicion. It's my reporting that had we not gotten our people out of harm's way, we were prepared to respond with massive force. Your comment on the speculation and on the reporting.
I think they're both accurate, both from my intuition and my own sourcing. So let's do the first one. I think it is increasingly apparent that there is a group of folks in Iran that are not displeased about the dispatch of Soleimani. And, hey, that's politics 101, right? When the second most important person in a country is killed, in their dark hearts, the third most important and the fourth most important and the seventh most important sometimes feel that's not such a bad thing. So,
well said. Yes.
and then let's also look at the reporting, sourcing, and I don't think you have to be clairvoyant or totally plugged into the U.S. military to know when a squadron of B-52s shows up, we're getting ready to go big. When our 82nd Airborne, our premier highly deployable ground unit deploys, we're getting ready to go big. Marine expeditionary units, naval forces, everything on the highest state.
And we don't even know where the boomers are, right? We don't know where the submarines with all their ballistic missiles are.
Correct. Close. And the short answer is they're close enough. And what you're talking about are the ballistic missile submarines that have been converted.
Yes.
Not nuclear, but to use Tomahawk cruise missiles.
Yes.
To be clear, there was no indication of any idea of using nuclear weapons.
Correct.
Obviously.
I'm talking about the ones that carry those platforms of all those missiles.
Those, and are very potent weapon systems, and were certainly within range. So, yes, we were ready to go big, and I think then you're into a whole different set of speculation. Sun Tzu, you and I both know Sun Tzu, the ancient Asian military strategist, would often say, hey, you want to do everything you can to throw your enemy off balance. He was the master of asymmetric warfare. He's kind of what the Iranians sort of follow. Don't be obvious. Tend to get around the corner. Take your bigger opponent down. Well, Sun Tzu also said, Hugh, when on death ground, fight. And what he meant by that, and I think the way the Iranians would have looked at a massive strike, would have been a massive asymmetric response. So I think we could have been in a very difficult situation with a lot of lives lost on both sides. This stand down is a very good thing.
Yes, it is. When we were in that middle ground, though, I've got to just, for the record, be honest. I sent my message to the people that I know in this business. Shock and awe, refineries, grids, bunker busters, sink their Navy, blind them, then do it again. They are firing missiles at our troops. Now, I'm glad we didn't have to do that. But if they had killed Americans, I just think the only response would have been massive and disproportionate retaliation, and that they should believe that today, that would be the response. Isn't that what the essence of deterrence is?
Deterrence is two things. It is capability and credibility, which is to say your opponent has to believe you have overwhelming capability to inflict harm upon them, and credibility, you are willing to use it. I think both of those exist, and I think the killing of Soleimani increases the credibility piece. Here's my point. We could have made the choice, let's say, God forbid, that a ballistic missile had killed a group of U.S. servicemen. I think that a massive response would have been warranted, but I think we would need to be prepared that there would have been a massive, by the standards of the Iranian military, response. I think Israel would have seen 15,000 incoming ballistic missiles, went on death ground fight. So you can make the case that even under that kind of extreme provocation, we shouldn't throw the entire shock and awe sink at them, but calibrate, move it up, take out a base. They have taken out one of our bases, take out one of our bases. Hugh, it's a debatable point. Whenever, here's my last comment on it, whenever you jump that ladder of escalation and you go high order, be prepared for your opponent to do exactly the same thing.
So I want to go to
has to be a consideration.
I want to go to the highest order because Afshan Ostavar, who's one of the people that I read very closely, in that window of about 3 hours when we did not know that we had received warning and had prepared our troops and that it was basically a fireworks display by Iran for internal propaganda. During those 3 hours, Ostavar tweeted out basically the worst case scenario is unfolding. if in fact that worst case scenario unfolds, they do not have a nuclear weapon. They do have 15,000 missiles. The Israeli and the American forces combined, and the Brits, who are also threatened, they can devastate Iran, can they not?
Yes, we can certainly devastate Iran, but Iran has created a lot of weapons of devastation around the region, which are quite deployable. They're not nuclear weapons. They don't have the same effect. They would have taken much more damage than they would inflict. But my point is we would simply have to be prepared for them to really unleash if we had gone another massive step higher in the ladder of escalation.
Now, at this, and my last question, they chose to blink. I'm glad they blinked. Now, how do they climb down? What do we look for? Maybe Khamenei has to die, and he's thankfully over 80, so maybe he will soon. And he's been reported to be sick years and years and years. How do they climb down from this position?
They will, I think, continue to wage what some have called, I think accurately, the shadow war with even more vigor and enthusiasm. So everything that we have seen over the last 6 to 8 months, going after tankers, creating disturbances in maritime traffic and shipping patterns, some targeted assassinations. But, Hugh, I think to where we started the conversation, it will most decidedly not be directed, at least at this moment, against U.S. blood, maybe against U.S. treasure. But I think President Trump has made pretty clear his red line, and let's hope the Iranians respect it, because I do, and I think he will at least consider a massive response next time around. And if we get that, I think we really are off to the races in the Middle East. So let's hope that the Iranians have woken up and smelled the tea.
Let me very quickly get from you, Admiral. I was, again, so impressed with the American military, how they scrambled, how they responded, how they struck, how they prepared. You saw it from the inside for 33 years. I'm sure you're talking to all your friends at the most senior levels. Same 5-star response from the American military?
100%. And boy, let's hit pause and say a word about the families, Hugh. Put yourself in the situation, I'd say to all the viewers, you got in your car to commute away this morning. Put yourself in the shoes of your spouse, your significant other, your child. Had you commuted away on a C-17 carrying a weapon deploying to the Middle East like the 82nd Airborne, that is tough. And we all breathe a sigh of relief. For them, this is an ongoing situation of great tension. And so we ought to hit pause and think not only about our 5-star men and women in the U.S. military, but our families who stand behind them.
I hope the 82nd gets back soon, and that is a great word on which to end. Admiral Stavridis, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at StavridisJ.